Thanks. And are the students? No.
I was joined all the way from Cambridge, Massachusetts by my man, Dr. Stewart Isaacs, PhD, Stanford University graduate, and world champion jump roper. We thank you so much for joining us. I got a room here with me at Velma Jackson High School. We're recording this for all of our computer science engineering students in Madison County Schools. My good friend Angela Jordan over there at Shirley Simmons Middle School, and my good friends Shatoria Kirksey and Angela Reed over at Old Town Middle School, and our YouTube channel. So thank you for taking some time for us today.
Of course, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really excited to chat with you and hopefully say some good stuff for the
Yeah. Now,
students.
now you've got an incredible resume. We'll talk about all the great work you've done at MIT and just on the cutting edge of some of this research. But you're originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, and you went to Stanford University, one of the most prestigious universities in the world. So, just give us a little background on your education and how you got to Stanford, and then kind of your Stanford experience.
Yeah, of course. So Cincinnati is an interesting place where we have like a system of public Montessori schools. So when I was starting my education, I was at a public Montessori like elementary school, and then we actually have one of the first public Montessori high schools that I went to for my high school education too. And so like, my education was all focused on like community and like a lot of like, self-directed learning. So I was doing a lot of like projects. And that got me into this kind of the field of aerospace. So it was, a lot of times I was doing like science projects on things like jet engines or like airplanes. And then for my high school senior project, I was studying the sustainable technologies to improve the sustainability of airplanes. And
Wow.
that's kind of what got me into thinking about engineering as a career. So those experiences, just studying things I was interested in, and also just having a lot of fun. We got opportunities to like make a lot of music and travel. That really opened my eyes up to the possibilities of the world, and so I applied to Stanford, and that worked out, and I had a great time there.
Yeah, and while you were at Stanford, I mean, we all know about the academic standards at a place like Stanford, and obviously we know their sports and everything. But one thing that I've noticed you did at Stanford is you were involved in a lot of student organizations. So even if somebody doesn't want to go into engineering, even if they want to go into finance or they want to go, whatever, it's very important to get your name out there and to network. So you were involved in a lot of things at Stanford University. So just talk about some of those things you did and why that was so important because obviously the GPA aspect is extremely important in college, but just as important is the networking aspect to have a plan after you graduate.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think that so when I was in undergrad, I was involved in quite a few student groups. So one of them, I started the student group Stanford Jump Rope. And that's because, in my elementary school, the Montessori school that I talked about, we had a jump rope team. And so I got involved in the sport of competitive jump rope pretty early on. Was very passionate about it, had a lot of success in terms of competing and opportunities to travel and learn a lot. And so I felt like, the sport has so much potential to, be great and like influence people's lives. I wanted to bring it with me at Stanford. So I connected with some other folks who I knew of who were also jumping, and we started the group, and it's still going now. That was just for fun, right? Like it's just like, jump rope's great. I think other people might enjoy it. Let's do this. And so we did, and we had a great time. So I was involved in that. But some of the other organizations I was involved in, like we had our like National Society of Black Engineers. And that's a professional society that, many colleges and I think some high schools too have chapters. And so for me, that was about like, connecting with, my Black identity and, Black community in order to facilitate professional and educational growth in that space. We were often like doing homework together. We were attending conferences, trying to find professional opportunities. And so for me, like, a lot of that is this networking piece. Like I was just last week, I was at a wedding for a guy who was, president of the NSBE chapter when I was there. And so, those continue to be like lifelong connections. And, of course, like, when they're having professional success, like, I don't know, becoming engineering managers at their particular firm, those become opportunities to also have jobs. But for me in the moment, a lot of the focus was just like, hey, let's come together and let's do this engineering thing in a way that we feel good about.
Absolutely. And then I know you've done some work in Africa, you've done work all over, and that took you to MIT, one of the most prestigious institutions on the planet, there in the Boston area in Cambridge. So just talk about how you go from the Midwest to the West Coast to the East Coast, all in the name of engineering, and some of the work you've done there at MIT.
Yeah, it's been interesting. So I didn't know about Stanford in high school, right? Like the only reason
Wow.
I applied was because my senior year I happened to get some mail. It was not on my radar at all. If someone asked me to point to Stanford on the map, I couldn't do it. So it was like I got some mail and I was like, oh, there's this place called Stanford in California. It looks like they do engineering things. Have my
Wow.
interest in engineering for my project, and so I was like, yeah, I'll apply. Like let's see if this works. With MIT, it was something similar where I think one of my friends in high school was really interested in MIT, and so I'd heard about it. I'm like, this place seems really nerdy. I'm never going. So I kind of wrote it off. And I was enjoying my time at Stanford, and really originally my plan was to like stay at Stanford forever, right? It's warm weather. I have really good friends there. And when I got to Stanford, I intended to study aerospace engineering, but they didn't have an undergraduate program at the time, right? So faculty were advising me, well, you should do mechanical engineering instead. And I listened to them. I did it. I studied mechanical. I had a great time. But in the back of my head, I knew that, okay, at some point I need to go to graduate school to get the aerospace engineering training that I actually was seeking out. And so around the time of my like senior year of college, I had a couple research opportunities, one at Michigan, and I wanted to continue that research in the graduate studies space. And a lot of faculty were encouraging me to look outside Stanford to do that. So, I applied to Michigan because I had done research there and I had heard, I'm like, okay, I hear good things about MIT. Let me submit an application there too. And so that's kind of how I got into MIT, right? It wasn't super intentional to be honest. But because I kept doing things that I thought were meaningful, it did create opportunities to where I could then seize the opportunity to go to MIT. And so just the experience-wise, very different places. Very different places. Like, the culture of the Midwest is so different from the West Coast and the East Coast. The flavor on the different campuses is really different. Like, Stanford's like it's like a resort. It's stunning. It's stunningly beautiful. Like there's trees and like there's a ton of
Yeah.
foliage. Whereas like MIT is like super industrial. It's like you're working in a factory. Not to say there aren't beautiful parts of campus, but it's just a very different culture. So it's been nice to like learn about different ways of doing things around the country.
That's incredible. Now, when you hear aerospace engineering, obviously the first thing we think of is airplanes, but there is so much more to it. There are technological advances every day in this area that the military uses, that civilian uses, that private corporations use. So, just talk about some of the things that these kids maybe can be a part of as they start to transition through high school, because it is something that is going to be more and more advanced as we go along.
Right. Yeah, aerospace, especially at MIT. So I'm in the aeronautics and astronautics department, and it's surprisingly broad, I think, especially at the graduate level, right? So typically we do think things like airplanes, we think things like rockets. Some people might also be familiar with satellites. So if you maybe you've heard of Starlink or maybe you watch TV and you use satellite, a satellite network. So like satellites are also within the wheelhouse of aerospace engineering for sure. But even with those like fundamental pieces, there's lots of other subdomains that people study. So for example, rather than transmit a signal for either internet or for uh, TV, you can also use satellites to take images, right? And so people take images of the Earth a lot in order to understand, things like atmospheric science or things like climate change, right? A lot of the climate science that we're doing now in order to tackle climate change utilize satellite information in order to like better understand how the world works. So people in my department also work on that. They do climate science using satellite information, and that's something that I do too. There's also people who look at things far beyond Earth. They might be imaging exoplanets outside of our solar system, or they
Wow.
might be sending satellites to things like Saturn or Jupiter's moons, which some people believe might, hold some of the building blocks of life, for example. So it can be really broad, and a lot of the things might seem kind of abstract or not super relevant to the problems we have on Earth, but one of the things I work on now is solar panel technology.
Oh, wow.
So I'm looking at ways to I use the satellite information to understand how the atmosphere impacts how we generate energy from solar panels. And I'm also looking at how the wind interacts with solar panels. So that's something
Wow.
that aerospace engineers do too. We look at aerodynamics. So people look at people can use aerodynamics to do things like design cars to cut through the air faster, or even to cool computer chips on Earth in server centers, right? Where these computers are doing a bunch of processes that generate a lot of heat and you need to cool it. So aerospace engineers can contribute to that too. So very broad, very broad. There's like way more applications of aerospace than I could have imagined in high school.
Now, you just mentioned a couple things that I think is important, because obviously you've got a PhD, you've got multiple degrees. And if we have young people that want to do that, by all means, we're going to support them to help them find the best programs. But I'm pretty sure that with your work, you deal with a lot of professionals that maybe didn't do the college route, that are certified technical people that have trades. So if we have kids that say, look, this stuff sounds really cool, but I'm just not really a college person, is there an opportunity to get into this area through certifications and apprenticeships?
I think so. I want to say yes. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not super knowledgeable on like alternative methods or alternative like career trajectories to get there. But you're right that I do work with people who might not have the same, degrees or certifications. And we're still effective, especially as we collaborate. I think within the United States, there's opportunities to certainly get into the manufacturing aspects. Lots of people are needed in order to build the airplanes that we fly in or in order to contribute to like the rockets that are going up into space more and more frequently now. So there's definitely opportunities to get into the manufacturing of these aerospace systems for sure. And then alternative like career trajectories. I think I have to think about that. I think I do spend a lot of time working in Africa. And for example, one of the projects I did was based out of, there's a country called Burkina Faso. It's in West Africa. It's one of the poorest countries in the world. And we were working on energy there. So like solar panels to help them produce what they need. And so a lot of people I was working with there, right? It might just be a part-time thing that they're doing where they're making, in our case, it was incubators for chickens, right? They might make incubators for chickens just on the side of their like actual professional thing, but it was still meaningful, right? And like, without them, we wouldn't have been able to get the project to move forward. So even if you're not necessarily in the engineering space, if you're committed and you want to see your community do better, there's opportunities to use your skill sets to support people.
Absolutely. Now, uh, obviously, this is something that isn't going away. So, as these kids are going through high school, maybe going to college, what are some things that they can start learning now, while they're in middle school, while they're in high school, to maybe get into this field? Because with what you're saying, this is a field that isn't going away, and it's only going to be more technologically advanced. So, if they're in high school now and say, "Hey, that sounds pretty cool," what can they start learning to get ready for it?
Yeah, of course. I think, you know, the foundations of an engineering degree program are certainly in math and science, right? So, making sure you're taking the math requirements, learning as much as you can, and of course, like the science requirements. I think a lot of colleges, they want to see things like, were you able to take physics in high school, or, were you able to learn calculus in high school? If you're able to do those things, you set yourself up, well for an engineering degree. Now, you don't necessarily have to have those things. If those aren't options, like it's still possible, but that does mean that you're going to spend some time in those early years, making sure that you can master your calculus, master your physics before you can progress into the engineering topics. So those are definitely things that, just in terms of when you're picking your classes, making sure you can take those courses, it's going to set you up a foundation for, getting into science and engineering. But, even outside of like the actual classes you take, there might be opportunities to develop some other skill sets. A lot of engineers, it requires a lot of creativity. So if you're doing activities that, foster that kind of creativity, whether that's art or that's music or, problem solving in some kind of way, th those do translate into the engineering practice. And so those shouldn't be, um, those are important. So those are that's another way to do that.
Now,
And then I think
that's a great
maybe one other
segue.
thing. Oh, go for it.
Yeah. Now, that's a great
Hmm.
segue because you mentioned problem solving. And I know I can speak for
Yes.
every other teacher that's going to see this later because problem solving is such a big part of not only engineering, but of all these STEM jobs. When you're working on a project, how often do you get it right the first time? Because what we deal with as teachers, oh, this is too hard, I quit. But you guys literally do things and do projects that we literally need to have a sustainable economy, to have a sustainable life. So it can't just be something, oh, this is too hard, I quit. So how often do you get it right the first time?
Almost never. That's just not how engineering works.
Yeah.
Like if you so maybe I'll say this. I think one of the most important pieces to an engineering degree is this, like, is persistence, right? Like you need to cultivate uh, a skill set of persistence within yourself, right? It's not something that you just like walk with, like you just grow up and you just happen to have persistence. Like it's something that you actively cultivate. So for me, right, like I got into the sport of jump rope really early, right? And I don't know if people have ever like picked up the rope, but like it's actually quite hard. Like, if I ask them to do a triple under, most folks can't because like it just the time required to put into it to do that is a lot, right? And like there's like infinite number of skills. It takes a lot of time to even be just decent at jump rope, to be honest. So for me, like I was like, working that persistence muscle throughout my life, right? And that does translate into engineering where a lot of times, like you work on it, it's wrong. All right. Now I need to like figure out what went wrong. How do I fix this? Right. I need to get help. I need to work with other people in order to get to the right answer, right? I think the flip side to that also is collaboration. So most engineers are not working by themselves, right? There's not like singular engineers working to like build incredible products. It's usually large teams that are collaborating and working together to make something that's great. So collaboration is also a skill set that can be fostered and developed. So if you're on a sports team, right, that's an opportunity to like develop your collaboration. Sometimes like for the engineering problem sets, like which we call our homework, right? They're designed to be done in teams. So you need to be working with other people. And so you being able to communicate well, being able to like, have some humility when you approach a problem, and also being persistent, all those things translate into an engineering career.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, we'd be remiss if we did not talk about your incredible jump rope career. And we'll share your Instagram here in a second because you've got some incredible clips. Because I was just telling the students here, I was like, this looks like something you would see in gymnastics in the Olympics, and he's got a dang jump rope while he's doing it. So, I've met a lot of athletes in my life, but I have never met a champion jump roper. So I think that's pretty cool. So, even if kids aren't interested in anything engineering, but they think the jump rope stuff's kind of cool. First of all, how did you get so interested in it? And second, why is it such a cool sport to participate in?
Yeah. I appreciate the nice words about jump rope. It's a pretty small sport, at least it is now, at least in the US. And when I was starting, I just happened to join a team that had the current world champion at the time. So he was
Oh
already
wow.
like super good, right? And so, my elementary school teacher was also the jump rope coach, and she had a team, and I join the team, right? And I see a world champion jump roper. And I was aware of like some of the opportunities that he had, right? So he had just gotten back from like South Korea competing and like won, and like there's like newspaper articles and like,
Dang.
also the jump rope team got to like yeah, I mean it was cool. And we would get to like, skip class to go perform at different schools for Jump Rope for Heart, which was nice. So like, we're eating
Yeah, I
pizza,
remember
we're
jump rope for heart.
performing,
Yeah.
we're traveling. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So Jump Rope for Heart used to like send these jump rope teams to like perform at schools. So there's a lot of incentive to stay in it just because like it's like this is cool. And there's a lot of opportunities. But also like it's a cool sport because like you said, right? Like there's things that like you could just like it's like what gymnasts do, but you have a rope in the hand, right? And the way I think about jump rope is that like almost anything you can imagine doing movement wise, whether that's breakdancing, whether it's gymnastics, dancing, fly fishing, like you can translate it into how you work with the jump rope, right? And that was something I definitely got to see at Stanford where there's people who are like never jumped in their whole lives. But they're like, yeah, like I've never jumped, but I did cheerleading. And so like we're going to do these cheerleading stunts with the ropes. And it's like, that's great, let's do it, right? Or it's like, yeah, I never jumped ever in my life, but I did fly fishing. And so we throw the rope like this. And it's like, all right, cool, let's do it in the jump rope.
Wow.
Let's see if it works. So there's just like a lot of opportunity to just like be creative, to make stuff new. It's still a relatively new sport, so there's a lot of opportunities to like really innovate and like make an impact on the sport, which I really appreciate. And then the travel opportunities for me have just been great. I've traveled a lot to a lot of different countries in the world. I've had a lot of opportunities to meet people, and I think even if it was just for that, like totally worth it.
That is so cool. And like I said, before we get done, we'll share your Instagram because man, we were looking at those clips and I was like, man, this is like watching American Ninja Warrior. So it was so dang cool. But I do have a couple questions from the
I
students.
appreciate
Uh,
that.
this is Bryson Stevens. He's in ninth grade. Brother is actually active duty Air Force right now, so he deals with a lot of aeronautic stuff. But he asked, what is your favorite part about studying aeronautics as an engineer?
My favorite part about studying aeronautics, I think that my favorite parts have to do with like when I think about flying just in general, right? Like it's kind of amazing to me that like we could do this, right? Like if you've ever been in an airplane and you're like above the clouds and you can like see the earth from like a totally different perspective, like it's wild, right? And so to like get into like the nitty-gritty of how does this like really work? Like when we look at all the individual air molecules and how it flows around a particular wing, and okay, if we can crunch the numbers to show that like if we can bend the air like this, we're gonna get lift, right? Like it's just like getting into like the real weeds of how the world works for me is really, really pleasing. And then to think about all the things that you can do when you understand that, right? It's just like, we can like we've totally changed the world by having flight. Like I can go to places like Hong Kong and perform because I can fly there. Like if we didn't have airplanes, how would I get there, right? I had to like go in a boat for like 3 months. You know what I mean? Like the applications of it are just so incredible. And so when I get to like look at and understand how this works and then think about ways to make it work for other kinds of applications, it feels really nice.
Awesome. Well, I got time for one more. This is Darius Cooper. He's a senior, and he asked, what project that you've worked on are you most proud of?"
Yeah, I think for me, the project I'm most proud of is I helped build this solar powered chicken egg incubator project in Burkina Faso. So with that project, we got contacted by this nonprofit that was looking for some engineers to help them basically build these out. And it wasn't just like we need to build this solar power incubator. It was also we want to be able to develop it ourselves because we know the importance of like mastering our own technology and making it meet our particular needs, right? So what incubators do is they essentially take chicken eggs and they provide the proper conditions so they can hatch, right? And they're better at doing it than just like regular than chickens. Chickens are just okay, but if you put in the machine, it can be better. And so it can allow people to like really eat. And working on that project, one, it totally changed my life in terms of like how I think about solar energy and also how to make it work in West Africa. But two, it was just really rewarding to, work with community members in Burkina Faso to feel like I was doing something that can really put food in people's bellies and is going to be
That's
important.
awesome.
And to see that like they're making them now, right? They can make them locally. So we got the job done. It took a couple years, right? And we got it wrong a couple times. And it's like a lot of money that also went into it, and we got it wrong. But like to see it through all the way, one, it made me feel like a legitimate engineer. But then two, it just that's why I got into this, right? I do engineering because I want to help people.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't realize that it can be extremely rewarding because it has so many tangible things that you see. To say, look, I had a part in that. If somebody wants to do civil industrial, you have buildings built. Look, I helped build that and it's safe. And, I help provide energy to this community because of our project. So there's so many tangible aspects for people that want that rewarding aspect of it. And I don't think that is given enough credit as to why engineering is such a great career. So that's super cool. And I would love to go to West Africa myself, just to be able to do something similar. So that is super, super interesting. Now, we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much for taking some time for us. But a couple things before we go. First of all, I mentioned it on Instagram. You are Jump Rope Stewart. That's Jump Rope, Stewart. I encourage everyone to go follow. There are some of the most incredible jump rope tricks you are ever going to see in your life. And it is this guy right here, and my jaw dropped on a couple of them. So, and then, it's also just getting awareness out about the sport. But, it's just, to be that great of an athlete and be able to have a jump rope with it is really, really jaw dropping. And maybe it can inspire somebody else to get into it.
Absolutely, yeah, and I would love that. I mean, jump rope changed my life, and I think it has opportunity to change a lot of people's lives too. I've seen it transform people in positive ways.
Yeah. Now, the last thing before we go, is this is a field that desperately needs diversity, like every field there is in this country. There's always we need more black men to get into this field. We need more minorities. We need more women. We need more people that speak multiple languages. We have a lot of first generation Americans in our district, and engineering could definitely use their talents and their skills, especially those that speak multiple languages. So why, even if a kid has never seen anybody in their family or never seen anybody in their community get into this field, why is there really a place for everyone to consider getting into this field, that desperately needs a mix of ideas and talents?
Great question. I think one of the things that I realized, I've been at Stanford and MIT. These are typically one and two engineering programs on the planet, right? And so I see what the room looks like at the highest levels when it comes to the people who are designing the technologies that are going to permeate through society. Um, when you're not there, and I mean you as in like, you, whatever minority group, you come from, right? Those problems that you're dealing with are not represented and they're not being built for. So for us, like it is very important that we become engineers because there's so many problems that just do not get addressed, right? People are building for their own communities, and if our communities aren't represented, then the technologies that are coming out won't solve our problems, or at worst, they make our problems worse, right? Which we've seen, right? And we're dealing with already. So, um, I highly, highly, highly encourage people to consider engineering because the world needs it. Like, if you want things to get better, that means that there is a tangible and straightforward way you can join engineering, you can learn technical skills, you can stay committed to wanting to support and uplift your community, and there's opportunities to actually get the job done.
Absolutely. Well, and I couldn't agree more. And just such a great inspiration. Incredible resume. I'll put your resume up against anybody we've had on this platform, and really, really cool. And a big shout out to Rochelle Ballantyne for connecting us. The chess champion movie star. She was a great guest for us as well. So thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Stewart Isaacs, all the way from Cambridge, Massachusetts. We appreciate you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really been a pleasure.
All right, talk to you soon, buddy.
All right, catch you later.